Hey everyone, I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times. I want to welcome you to today's Power Talk, and we'll be discussing how to build a data-driven DevOps culture. So with me today are Steve Boone from HCL Software and Bryant Shuck as well. How you doing, fellas?
Hey, Dave, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Before we get started, I just want to let people know that we're going to be recording this, so it'll be available on demand. They can replay it to their heart's content starting tomorrow. And also, since this is kind of a live conversation, we'll be taking questions throughout the event. So if you have one, just simply go to the questions tab in your control panel, type it in, hit send, and we'll get to as many as time will allow. All right, so just to get started, we're talking about building a data-driven DevOps culture. And Steve, let me start to you. So data obviously is the fuel that drives everything in industries these days. When you're talking about a DevOps and data-driven DevOps, where do you begin? What data are you looking for? How are you measuring things in the pipeline?
It's a really good question. There's no shortage of data that we produce as DevOps organizations. I like starting granular. Like I like to think about just even from an agile perspective. How are we interacting as a team? How are we processing work? How do we handle work? How do we track work? So from my perspective, some of the first things we like to do when we're working with customers is hook up to their source code issues and hook up to their work item management tools, right? And try to understand, can we make the correlations between this is the code that I'm writing, this is the business value or the work that it's associated to. And just by linking up those two areas, you can easily start to see where we're spending our time as an organization, what we are prioritizing over other work. And then you get to start asking some really interesting questions like, is that what we should be working on? Is that really the priority thing we should be doing? And especially now, when we're in this day and age that we are, where everyone's working more remotely, it's a little bit harder to know exactly what everybody's doing. We have these stand-ups that are, I think, kind of the core competency of a lot of agile and scrum teams. What did you work on yesterday? What are you doing tomorrow? And what blockers do you have, kind of thing. And that's good. That says what we intend to do, but it doesn't always, encapsulate what actually is getting done. And so I think, just right out of the gate for a lot of folks, looking at those two pieces of data can start to allow you to answer and ask, I should say, many more important questions. And the more data points we pull in, the more interesting the story gets.
Yeah, and just to build off that, Steve, I think that's always something that's challenged me, right? We do these retrospectives. Everyone says continuous improvement, but how do you measure that, right? You're usually using one tool. It's exactly like Steve was alluding to. Once you start putting this data together, you start getting those metrics. You start looking at, what actually continuous improvement, what did you change? How did it help? Did you have the business outcomes that you wanted?
Excellent. So I guess one of the things that people talk about gathering all this data for is to help continuously improve. And one of the techniques people are starting to use these days is value stream management. So who's that for exactly? And who's benefiting? What roles does value stream help? Is it solely for the business? Is it for developers? Maybe you can elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, I can take that one. So, when we talk to customers, it can be very broad, right? It could be almost anyone can benefit from value stream management because SDLC does go across such a broad spectrum of roles. But really, we want to focus in on kind of that business and IT conversation, right? It's kind of aligning the two departments. Business always wants more things done. IT wants to do more things, but there's always a limitation. But it's hard to have that conversation between the two organizations because they don't speak the same language, right? Usually businesses are around budget, people, headcount, contributors. IT is more looking at how much did we deliver, how fast are we going with lead time and cycle time. So, I really see value stream management as helping the overall organization. But your high personas like senior executives, project managers, product managers, but it really kind of goes down from high level to bottom up, because once these senior executives have made the decisions of, what they want to go change, you need the whole team to buy in and also execute to that. So, that's one reason we see the value stream map and having that live view of the data really helping, because we can set goals at a high level, but it's really the people, individual contributors, that are going to reach those goals, make the processes better, get the code out to our customers faster.
Yeah, and maybe just even put some real tangible examples, right? From a developer on a team of maybe 10, 12, the two pizza sized teams, knowing who's working on what. If we get pulled from a fire drill, being pulled into a fire drill for a customer, who can pick up my work, who has too much on their plate, who needs help. From a security perspective, maybe you're an AppSec manager, being able to look across your different applications, maybe a value stream per application. Who's running security scans, who's not? Can we identify and start to track teams that are resolving security defects quicker than other teams? Why? Why are they more efficient than other teams? Is it lack of training? Is it lack of tools? Do they need more people? Those are good questions that a CISO or an AppSec manager wants to do. I want to get better at security. Where are my deficits at in the organization? Testing, the same thing. Millions of flavors of testing: functional, API, regression, service virtualization. Who's doing what? Right? Where are our gaps? How do we know? Can we answer the questions? Are we getting better at security as an organization? Are we getting better as quality as an organization? A lot of folks, when we talk about value stream management, you hear people that say, well, what we really want to do is help companies get to market faster, eliminate waste, go from A to B. And I think that's a great outcome, right? We want to move more quickly. I would think that a lot of the customers I talk to, they say, oh, no, our clients aren't telling us to move more quickly. They're telling us to walk more assuredly, be more confident, get there safely, make sure that we're not putting them at risk, making sure that when they take an upgrade, it works, making sure that we're checking all the right bells and whistles. So getting there quickly, getting out the door fast is good. But all of the different steps along the way that people contribute, that kind of what we would think of as slow things down. We do more security testing, it takes longer for us to get out the door. We do more QA testing, that takes longer. Can actually start to show that if you spend more time there may be better trade-offs, right? And what can we look at for waste that's not necessary? Handoffs between people, being able to clearly communicate to other part of the businesses how we work, when we work, why we work the way we do. Those are the things that I see take up a lot of time. Case in point could be, we want to release software. To get it out the door, we're spending sometimes several meetings, hours long, in release readiness, right? Have we done the things we needed to do for the business? So it's us looking at all this stuff. We're saying, yes, look, we reduced defects by 10% and we don't have any high severity defects. We know this stuff. We don't need to pull 12 people in a room who are paid extremely well to sit there and go, okay, we feel confident about it. The data can tell us that. We shouldn't need to pull those people together unless we're not confident in the data, and that data tells us that there's something absolutely wrong.
Right. Interesting. So how does data, you mentioned security, so what role does data play in helping to ensure security and even, governance, policies, restrictions, things?
It's one of my new favorite topics right now. The security, I feel like as an organization, right? When you work, especially if you work at a large company, there are certain things each application team must do from a governance perspective to check the box, right? We need to do pen testing, we need to do some security testing. Maybe you're running some tools like check marks or app scan or white source. So you're doing those things, but there isn't a whole lot of idea of, can the business answer? Are we actually more secure today than we were 6 months ago? And I think that's actually what we're supposed to be asking ourselves. How do we take the conversation of security testing to not just be, okay, I feel good right now, but actually more of and I feel confident about the path we're going, because as an organization, we're maturing in our best practices, in our understanding of how we do security. And it's reflected in our value stream. We can see that work in real time. And so the ways that you start to measure that are things like we would talk about in defects, mean time to recovery. You have an outage, SaaS outage, you're going to go out there and you're going to see how long does it take for us to identify the outage, make sure we're back up and running. And as a time, you look at that and say, if that's a short thing, the team's high performing, they can, snuff that out and get it fixed really quickly. It's the same thing around security defects. Most teams that I talk to today, they're only concerned about high vulnerability defects, right? They're coming in, it's a high severity, we got to go fix that one, or the business will be honest. What about the 100 different medium or the 200 low?
Right.
Those are just technical debt that we tend to ignore. And I think that if you really wanted to show security improvement, you'd see those numbers go down over time, not just for high, but for medium and low and across the scope. So having that kind of data at your fingertips, I think, shows maturity for the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the last word in value stream management, managing the value stream, right? How are you actually managing it? And it used to be done on spreadsheets and, like Steve said, CAB meetings. Every stakeholder brings all this data together. It's on PowerPoints. It's probably outdated by the time they walked into the room. I think if we start managing this with data, we're in a much better position to make those decisions, see the health of the true application. It's not just what someone's story they're telling you, but it's actually the health and actually seeing how everything is flowing throughout the system.
And when are you collecting this data? At every step of the way? Are there certain checkpoints where you have, okay, we got to here, now let's check? Or how does that work in terms of actually collecting and making sense of the data?
So collecting data is hard, but I think we get lucky because we're in a field of technology. So all these tools have these robust APIs, and everything seems to be daisy chained together in some fashion, right? Something has an attribute that kicks off something else. Of course, there's manual tasks still happening in the background, but there's a way to start linking this data together. So when we're collecting all this data into a single source, you can start seeing from idea all the way out to the customer what happened to these individual items. And I think that's what really kind of set this to the next level was you can do this on a whiteboard. You can kind of get an idea of how long things take or how many times securities are running. But when you actually see the live data and how it's tied together, I think that's the game changer in value stream management.
Yeah, and there's no shortage of data. I think that's what we keep stumbling over too. Like, and then once you have it, the ability to slice it for different people in your organization, the same set of data. What a developer cares and wants to pull out of that data, and what ultimately the head of engineering cares about wants to pull out of that data are often different. So what we think we've excelled at here for us is not only being able to capture the data, but then provide those individual viewpoints based on the person and the role and the things that you care about, but ultimately have a way of rolling that up for the whole business so that everybody can take advantage of it. What I mean by that is that's when we start getting into things like intelligent gating, right? Can we actually use it from a governance perspective to say, yes, we want to release the software and we've done the due diligence by analyzing the data to know that we haven't put anybody at risk, right? Quality's good, security's done. We have decreases in, let's say the number of severities we might have. We've done the code reviews that we've, put ourselves in. As organizations, we set up best practices. And I think what the beauty of value stream management, if it's implemented correctly, is that as we can teach the culture to embrace the best practice. We make the best practice the path of least resistance. So you don't got to go figure it out yourself. As an engineer, you're more likely to do the right thing if it's easy for you to do. And so by structuring your value stream with those best practices and making them gates that we must go through, there's really no other choice but to do those things. And the more we do it, the more we practice it, the more ingrained it is in our culture. And I think that's the key part, right? Is that if we want to change culture, we have to put emphasis on the things we care about, and we got to get people to do those things on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, I believe we have a poll question now that we're going to put up and ask folks to respond to whether or not they have adopted a data-first DevOps strategy. So we'll give them a few seconds to answer, and we'll see what we have. Okay. So one of the things we'll talk about before we get this data in, Steve, is what in your experience have you found to be the thing that's holding organizations back from adopting this kind of a data first or data driven DevOps strategy?
Yeah, I think that it requires an in-depth knowledge of knowing, one, as Brian pointed out, capturing the data, challenging, right? So if you're an independent person that says, I want to go gather all this data, you're writing against those APIs to go pull that data in. Now, then you need to analyze the data. You have to have some idea of what you think you want to look for. So there's a learning curve and understanding what do I care about in this data? How do I know that it's valuable? And so right out of the gate, you have people that struggle with that. They'll look for some open source alternatives that might be out there that can show you things like build counts, deployment counts, cloud spend, some real static numbers. Hit an API, get a number, put it on a screen. But I think the challenge then lies is, how do you take all of that data, put it together to give yourself an idea of risk, to give yourself an idea of confidence, and so that you can actually then look at the forest instead of an individual tree. And I think that's the hard part. A lot of people don't go down this path because they feel, with the time and energy and resources they can put into it, that they're just going to build a dashboard, yet another dashboard, where they already have 30 or 40 of them. And value stream management is far removed from just being a dashboard. This isn't just a thing that we hang up to look at deployment counts. Now, could you use it for that? Yes. It'd be like, buying the Ferrari when all you needed was the golf cart. But if you really want to go and you want to have something that can transform your business based on how your teams are working, help you as an executive say, hey, if we want to go build a new project, what technology should we do it on? Should we do it in Java? Should we do it in .NET? Should we do it on the cloud? Should we do it on-prem? What, out of all of the data points that I have in my organization, what's my fastest path to getting this thing done? And I would know that because I will be able to look across all my different value streams and see how well they perform, right? See who's got the capability to do these things and take on these extra new projects. A dashboard won't do that for us.
Yeah, Steve, I think you're hitting on an important point there is, even if you are collecting data, it's probably not normalized across teams in the organization. So when we start talking about value streams, you start getting more of a normalized feel of what metrics matter. You can start saying lead time for all value streams as a certain stage to a certain stage, and then you can start seeing what your high performing teams are doing differently. So I think really around it is, what is holding organizations back is, maybe they're doing it, but they're not seeing the benefits because they're doing it in-house, or the tool's not providing kind of those blanket terms. I was on a security webinar and she goes, if you provide your CISO suite 1,000 vulnerabilities, they're going to ask, so what, right? What does this mean, right? What tool did it come from? Does this actually hurt the application? Kind of like what you were saying, Steve, 100 highs, 500 mediums, then 200 lows. What does that mean? Are we getting better over time? Everything like that starts coming into play. When you can do that across teams for a large enterprise, that's where you start getting true value.
That's right.
Excellent. So just to share with our attendees the results of the poll, 50% of the respondents said that they are not adopting a data-first DevOps strategy. 30% said they're working on it. 10% have said, yes, we do. We are data-driven. And 10%, interestingly, we're not sure.
Yep.
Kind of reflects what you say about the challenges of getting it going.
It not only that, of where we are in this marketplace for something like value stream management, right? It's a very early market. I think a lot of folks we're still in that early adopters phase. I think 2021 is really the year, though, that we're going to start to see that transition. You're already starting to see, the likes of analysts, Forrester, Gartner, a lot of them are dropping their research for continuous delivery release automation. Why? It's proven. People know what we need to go invest in there. Yes, you need automation, good, go invest in that. But what they're transitioning to and starting to build up now and are looking to invest more, and depending on the outcomes of their initial research, is value stream management in a place of that, because it holistically encompasses everything DevOps. It is full picture. And I often think about, when we think about the evolution of how we got to value stream, we started in a lot of cases out of Agile. Agile slowly morphed into some practices that we started calling DevOps. Here we find ourselves now talking about value stream, and it's kind of come full circle. Had we started with value stream, had we started with what's the best way for us to work together, to manage the work, to make the work visible, I think we would have ended up at Agile. We would have said, hey, we should try some things and come back real quick when we notice they don't work before we get too far down this path, right? And I think that would have transitioned and we would have easily morphed back into DevOps. So it is cyclical in that sense that, it is really emphasizing core best practices of how we communicate and work together as people around very hard things that, a lot of these things we're talking about aren't tangible. You can't touch a work item. You can't physically touch the code, but we can represent it and make it visible in a way that's easy for all of us to understand.
Mhm.
And I think what may be holding some back is it's kind of the feeling of, I think we're doing all right, right? I think, I've been at a lot of companies, small, big companies. I walk in there my first day. No, we do all right, right? We ship product. Our customers are happy, but I think it's starting to change, right? People are looking for what's next or how can I do this better? And I think that's really kind of what's holding organizations back is I think that 50% that said no is going to start going to that 30% that said working on it. Because I think with the change in times and everyone trying to get, that leapfrog mentality where you don't want to get taken out by the next startup, right? You want to start performing like these high performing teams. You're starting to see more analysis done on what metrics high performing teams are doing. And I really think, people are starting to realize that that may be holding them back is they aren't doing data-driven DevOps. And so I think that's going to push more people to start looking at this field.
Yeah, you make up a good point. Like, this idea of high performing teams. I like the analogy of the unicorns, right? There are only so many unicorns in the market who can really do I'm going to go push this thing to live. I'm going to gather real-time results about users interacting with my system and then make sure that that change is a good change, quality change. There's no other performance issues with that change. And that I'm also able to go get how are people interacting with this new feature? Are they enjoying it or not? Like, that is something that the unicorns can do. Our large companies, the enterprise companies, the workhorses aren't unicorns, they're workhorses. How do we get and help those companies make the steps to be able to talk and act like unicorns? And we do that by embracing data-driven DevOps. We do that by understanding how we spend our time, where our time's at, how can we free up people to go solve the bigger challenges so they're not sitting here churning paperwork, rubber stamping approvals, making sure and signing off on environments, making sure environments are compliant, right? All of that stuff is things that take away and take a lot of resources. So by automating a lot of the back end side of DevOps, I do think that we get a lot of return and get to free people up to go tackle some of those more challenging problems.
Mhm. You had mentioned there being no shortage of data to be collected. Yet I know
Yep.
a lot of organizations struggle with data paralysis while they're trying to do data analysis. So how do you go about building a data culture in an organization where it's more than dashboards, but they don't feel so overwhelmed that nothing is actionable because there's just too much stuff?
It's a great question. I think you got to find, and Brian, I'd love to hear your input on this too, but I think you got to find the right data for the right people at the right time. And like, that sounds cliche, but as a developer, the thing I want to care about is the change that I made. Is it there are just certain internal processes we take. I want to make code. It needs to be reviewed. That review needs to be reviewed again. +1, +2. It gets committed. Things happen. Just that alone. Where is my change? What is it related to? Where are we in the sprint? Right? What are the other things that are? Am I working on the right thing? Is this the highest priority thing right now? Those types of things for front end, not front end, but for our developers is important. For a product manager, somebody like me, what data do I care about right now? Are we going to hit our business commitments? The things we said we committed to our clients, to our stakeholders, are they getting done on time? When I go and have my, once a week meeting and I got to report out, hey, we're on track. I don't just want to, guess. I don't just want to be doing the thing where I'm going to tell everybody, yeah, it looks good. I want to know. I want to set expectations accordingly. How do I do that? Well, I know I'd be able to look in real time to see what things did we commit to. Have they been started? Have they been actually delivered? Are we ahead or behind schedule? Release engineers, right? You know, hey, what's the quality of this release? Do we have confidence in going out there? Do we do all the things we told the business we would? So it is being able to have that right data at the right time. And it's that I think is how we build the culture around that, is getting people to interact with it, make it visible. First of all, they need to know it's there. You got to give them access to it, and then you got to give them the views that they need. And at that part, you will see people change their behaviors on just based on it. Gamification proved this to us, by the way, that if we put a score on something, people naturally want to have a high score. They will work to go do that. And so it's not just about gamifying quality or governance. We're not just going to build a score and say, make your score better. But people will look at the numbers and they'll go, huh. And these are smart people. They naturally know if those numbers are good or bad or what they want them to be. They know the impact on their everyday. So they will go make an effort to improve those numbers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Steve. It's you got to make it big and visible what you're driving towards so people know how they're affecting the big picture.
That's right.
I think also with data driven and value stream management is, are you working at the right place? So many teams go and attack developers and they say, oh, we got to go from 2-week scrums to 1-week scrums, but they're not looking at the full picture. Is design actually taking too long? Is it actually kind of down the path where you have manual QA still, and that's taking too long? So, I think something around data driven actually drives focus, so you're not thrashing and you're not trying to solve all the problems. You can actually spot the biggest bottleneck in your whole value stream and then go attack that, right? And then once that one's solved, go look for the next one and keep doing that in an iterative approach. And overall, all the other metrics that those rise up to, you now have a good sense if you're making big impacts or not.
Yeah, we wouldn't every time we have a problem with our car, we don't just throw it out and buy a new car. And I think a lot of times in organizations, when we have problems in engineering, the answer is throw more money at it, hire more people. Maybe, but what kind of people? Where? For what? And when you take your car to the shop, they'll tell you this is what's wrong with it. You don't need to get rid of the car. You need to fix this problem, right? And that's the kind of thing. Because why? Because they have the data. And that's what we're trying to do here. You might have plenty of developers. They might be doing everything right. But if at the end of the day, what we have is a shortage on design, and 5 teams are utilizing the same design team, guess what? That's why we're waiting. That's why things are taking a long time to progress. Same thing with QA, right? So it's just about understanding. So the thing is inherently, people on the ground floor know these things. They know where the work is getting held up. But when we try to communicate it into a large enterprise, it sounds like finger pointing. No one understands the struggles that each group has day to day. No one understands why things are structured the way they are. It just is. And so we're stuck as end users trying to figure it all out. And the best way we can help build empathy from all these people to understand, hey man, wow, I didn't realize you got your design team's 5 people. You're supporting 20 projects. Maybe I should be a little bit more gentler when I poke every other day and go, hey man, were you able to look at my story? Right? Like those things are so important to the culture and how we understand the business as a whole. And that's just something where, again, if you have the data and you know where work is at any given time and why it sits or why it moves, you just have a better understanding of what you're signing up for when you come into work that day, right? You know how things. Some people are terrified that it's going to look bad. I would argue that you already know that there are areas of improvement. You either want to improve them or you don't. To Bryant's point, I think there are many companies right now that go, it's okay, we're doing just fine. And I beg the question of how successful could you really be if that's the attitude that you're having?
Yeah. But I think there's also a lot of resistance from people who feel like, Big Brother's watching and they're going to get the finger pointed at them if something went wrong. And it's hard for organizations to move away from that blame situation and go to a blameless thing. We're we accept the fact that there are going to be mistakes. We don't blame you for them. How do we find them, fix them, and get them better?
100%. And while you were talking about that, I just had this other thought. We were talking about culture and a lot of these other things. What do you think the average turnover for employees are at a tech company these days? 1 to 3 years? You're especially for a lot of the younger folks, then they're off onto the next thing. how do you even establish culture? It's constantly a revolving door, right? So like if we don't as a company say, this is how we're going to operate, we will take these things seriously, we will hold them at high regard and make sure that they are done. If we don't do that, then as people come in, they constantly have to learn what's important and what's not important. That's really hard to do when you're also trying to learn new product, meet new people, and adapt. So it's like the value stream as the structure of the vehicle that releases the code can be that almost like culture train. This is how we do it here, right? We'll improve it over time, but if you're coming in here, there's one way to get out this door. We've streamlined it. We've found all the things that the business cares about that we know we need to do. All you got to do is write your code, man. The rest will be done for you.
And it'll certainly make onboarding, it'll certainly make onboarding more efficient and easy to get people going.
Yeah. How do we build software around here? Let me show you the value stream, right? And you can from there can talk about every aspect of it.
And it becomes part of the culture then. Then it's not finger pointing. It's just, this is what we do. Here's our metrics. Here's how we measure success. Here's our KPIs. Here's our OKRs. Let's go after these. Let's get everyone on board. And then if you have the majority, right, a new guy comes in, he just fits right in. It just kind of works.
Right.
They just start running. Instead of the new guy coming in and be like, you guys do it this way, I want to change things, right? And then you got to, fight all that transformation, or maybe he's got a better way to do it, but we don't know that yet. So there's a lot of things there that this can align everyone and kind of get everyone on the same page, so it's not finger pointing, so it's not just calling out a specific group of people, because as a whole we all have to do our part so the business succeeds and we can all get bonuses, hopefully.
Yeah,
that's the driver, isn't it? The bonuses.
It's always money.
Yeah. So we've been talking a lot about value stream, but to just take a little bit of a dive into that, people, this is something I think that's been now spoken about 2.5 years, something like that, maybe 3. And people very often want to know where to get started and how to get started. And maybe you can talk a little bit about that, and maybe some of the mistakes you see when you work with companies that people making as they're trying to move to a value stream management kind of a situation.
Yeah, we got some really good resources. You can check out HCL Tech SW. There is a couple of great ebooks around data-driven DevOps. Also another one on getting started with value stream management, right? Just kind of understanding what are some of the things you can do outside of purchasing any type of software to just understand the concepts of value stream, to start that conversation internally. Yeah, it's a little bit of whiteboarding. Yeah, it's a little bit of a kind of a team building exercise, but really asking the question, start with just development. What do we do? How do we process work? And I think if you just chart out that, you'll find between the different people, there's inconsistencies. They don't agree on how it's done. So the question is what's the right way to do it, right? There are there's usually sometimes many different ways people can determine where something should go based on the outcome of it. So you start to get this like branching diagram of if this, then we do that. And in that alone, that kind of mapping exercise is extremely important. Problem is people might only do that once a year in their company, and it might only be certain teams that do it. It certainly isn't a business exercise. Right. And so, I think those are some of the easy ways to get started. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I was going to piggyback off that, Steve. And, my biggest advice is don't try to go boil the ocean the first round, right? Don't try to go from idea and, XYZ tool that's very high level all the way out to a customer, right? I completely agree with Steve, is like, get a team together. Maybe you probably already know where a problem area is. Start mapping that out. And I think really what I love about this, and what I loved about Agile when I first learned about it, was you can do it with just a whiteboard and some cards. Or now I guess virtually we can do it maybe in PowerPoint or some other tool. But the upfront cost to get started and have these conversations is low. And then you can start bringing in tools, right, to help with it, to propagate that information. I remember my first Scrum team, we were all whiteboard until someone was in Wisconsin. And then a tool became immediately important, right? Because we had to broadcast out the information. So, I would say start small, start looking at the data, start just getting estimates. Even if you're drawing your value stream map and you're just putting, maybe in review takes 3 days because that's what kind of the developers are talking about. Start putting some soft numbers on these until you can get to a point where you're making them hard. But I think getting everyone bought in, start looking at it at that simple form, I think will make the process a lot better. If you just come down and say, hey, we're going to use this tool, everyone's going to do value stream management, I think that's going to be a harder sell to the team. I think you really got to get their buy-in for this.
Well, and you mentioned, Dave, a really interesting point too, is where do you see people stumble, right? And Brian, you mentioned this idea of trying to boil the ocean. The other thing that I see people coming in, there is this idea that value stream management, the number one thing that you might get out of value stream management is understanding the cost of your value stream. And that is a noble aspiration to go after. There are some tools out there that will tell you they have cost calculations for value streams in their product. A lot of that is, hey, you enter in some number, we'll do some basic math and we'll give you a cost estimate. It is extremely difficult to understand what it costs in a value stream, how much time people are spending, where they spend that time, what they spend it on. What you can do, look though, is at the time. Where do we spend our time? And then you can ask yourself, is that where we're supposed to be spending our time? And I think ultimately, if you have people spending the time in the right areas, you will absolutely reduce cost. I think people want to know what it costs because ultimately they want to keep costs down. I think it's harder to get an absolute on what's this cost. So if you go into value stream management trying to identify what something costs you, I think you're missing the point. Go into value stream management with eyes a little bit more broad than that say, where are opportunities to improve how we're doing things to become more efficient? You will find other areas that will inevitably help you bring that cost down. Right now, you might want to measure that, you might want to figure it out. And if you know what an FTE costs at your organization, you'll easily be able to check out and go, okay, I can build out some basic calculations. But if that's what you're going into it for, I think, while that might lead you to the water, I think you're missing the bigger opportunity here, which is look at all of the ways I can improve our organization to lower cost, to improve quality, to improve security, to build better collaboration, business alignment, business continuity. That's really what I think people should be looking for in this. Don't just focus on that dollar figure.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you end up improving some of these metrics like lead time and quality so much where your throughput and your feedback loop is going up, right? You're getting more out to the customer faster, better quality. And then you can start maybe taking some people off that team because every product is at a different life cycle, right? Do you need that fast of throughput? Or maybe you could take 1 or 2 people off a team, put them on another team and, take those learnings and kind of propagate it out. So that's a great point, Steve. It's not just always about the bottom line and FTEs. It could actually, work in your favor that you're doing this and you're freeing up resources and time.
Interesting. Well, we have a question from one of our attendees. His name is Peter. And the question is, what are your thoughts on test-driven development?
Yep. So it's an interesting question, as it pertains to value stream. I think there's always a place. To me, it's a cultural thing. If you've got developers are familiar with TDD and they can come in and they're used to doing it, awesome. I have seen it succeed in organizations. I've seen it fail out of the gate in organizations. Why? Because a lot of developers aren't really good at pairing. That's a social, cultural thing you got to be used to doing. I'll write this piece, you write the test to go with it, boom, check the box and move on. If you've got a team of people that are comfortable interacting like that, I think it could be really positive because not only that, we talk about tracking business value. I think of that as a work item. How are you structuring your TDD tickets? Do you have 2 tickets tied to one thing, or one is what I'm writing and the corresponding test that goes with it? Do you track it as one work item? You can get good feedback on that if you're looking to, from an assurity standpoint, making sure every code that's committed also has, let's say a unit test or some kind of test to go along with it. Great. Internally, I could tell you from our experience, at least the teams that I have managed, we have had good success with TDD. What we have had better success with is when you commit your code, you must know that there needs to be corresponding unit tests with it. That's going to get reviewed by 2 different people. So the code never makes it anywhere. Every developer at that point is forced to be able to know how to write corresponding tests. You're not getting that collaborative effort right off the gate. But for where we were culturally, most people were like, dude, I just let me do my job. I've been in other companies that I visited where people are locked at a single laptop, 2 people to a laptop, taking turns writing that. I think it's a great educational process if you have the ability to do it. If your team will embrace it, I think there's way more to gain from it than not doing it.
Yeah, I agree on that, Steve. And what I like, you said it's not one size fits all, right? And I'll kind of go back to my bottleneck statement is why are you trying to do TDD? Do you have a bottleneck in QA? Are you trying to alleviate some of the down processes, right? Because obviously you want to automate some of those tests. So there's a need someplace. Is that the right investment? Are you going to go invest in TDD because that is the biggest bottleneck? You can't get more resources and you need your developers to start doing automated testing, because that's a whole different question. Then you have the data to start backing that up, having that conversation. But overall, I'm a big component of TDD. I do think it does help the quality statement. They're ever living, it's right once, used forever type of deal. But I do think that if you have this data, you can start having that conversation that maybe this team does need TDD because their quality is deprecating and we can't get more QA resources. That's a great use of the conversation we're talking about.
I will say one of the things I have noticed, and maybe it's just my observation from the teams that I've seen, the work tends to take longer, right? Because it forces the conversation of how are we doing it, what are we doing it. You both have to come up with a plan to achieve the outcome that you want. So it's good because it's thorough, but it does take longer, right? And so I think you'll find that a lot of people I see people not wanting to embrace it, but it's kind of like the same story with quality and security. Sometimes you need to spend the time there for better benefits down the road. So I apologize if you can hear my kids in the background going crazy.
Not a problem. So one other thing I wanted to ask about is, let's say organizations make the decision they're going to become a data-driven company. What can they expect from the first months of effort on this, 3 to 6 months? What will they see benefit right away? How do you set the expectation of somebody embarking on this path of this is where you're going to be, 6 months down the road?
I think the first probably thing people are shocked about is, I call it the stepping on the scale moment, right? You see the numbers for the first time and you think, uh-oh, we got some problems, right? There might be some follow-up meetings. They might, think like drastic changes. So, I think after that initial shock kind of rolls off, I think you start getting a lot pinpointed actions, right? You start having those discussions of what do we want to focus on. You start getting that alignment. So 3 to 6 months is, a really fast period, right? I think you learn a lot. I think you're kind of in that flow period where you're actually seeing what's flowing, how it's flowing, and you're starting to do a lot of like realization about your value stream. But I think a lot of people try to jump into the optimizing. Let's start tearing things apart. Let's start changing things. I really recommend to our customers that 3 to 6 periods, kind of take it in, right? See how it's flowing. See what your trends are. See what's happening. Maybe make some minor changes if there's fires, but really start putting a plan together. And I think that's really where I see that first 3-month period is. It starts that realization. You start really feeling it, and you start really getting a grasp on what you're going to go do in the next year to resolve some of the problems.
It's a very good question, and Brian, I think your answer's spot on. I think you got to be realistic about what your outcomes are going to be in the first 3 to 6 months, and I think that's why a lot of folks are hesitant. We look back to the poll, 50% no. Well, I think the big part of this is what should my expectations be in those first 3 to 6 months? I think that you'll be able to communicate more clearly to your upper management and your clients and your stakeholders about where work is held up, And if someone were to ask you, how's this project, how's this initiative, where's this epic, you'll know right away, right? And that alone has value to it. So there's this idea of just straight visibility. Now that's not improvement, right? That's not saying, hey, 3 to 6 months, you're going to be releasing software faster, right? That is a people and process problem. What value stream management, one of the biggest things that I think we can do is, if we want to improve, and what's DevOps about? People, process, and technology, right? If we want to improve people and process, we have to be all talking in the same terms. We got to understand about what it is we're talking about. We have to be in agreement to what the processes are. And like I said earlier, a lot of times if you go to a team and say, tell me how you think this works, people have different opinions on how it works. So if we plot it out, we're all on the same page. We know and see how it's working. We can all come at it as a singular focus on how are we working independently? How are we working as a group? How does our group fit in and work with the business? Then we can start working on how we're going to improve things, right? Value stream management to me is the ultimate in embracing agile. You want to embrace agile, you want to get better at planning, collaborating, making sure people in ops understand the problems in dev and the people in dev understand the challenges in ops. Make the work visible, man. Make them feel it. Allow them to empathize with the challenges across the business. Then we can actually have meaningful conversation about collaboration, about optimizing and improving how we work. But to Brian's point, a lot of people in the first 3 months, I think, are just sitting back and going, man, I didn't realize there's so much going on here, right? And so, the ability to search your data, to find a work item, or a customer logs a defect. They go, hey, I was curious, we had this defect we submitted 2 months ago. You know when that might be coming out? Like, when would we do that? Be able to search that data, find that defect, see where it's at, and know, hey, based on where this thing's currently at in our value stream, it's 2 weeks, it's 2 months, it's 6 months. Like, that alone is a ridiculous amount of value, because normally someone would have to go figure that out. Someone's gonna have to spend time to go curate that answer. So to me, like I said, the initial data, if you know what you're looking for in those first 3 to 6 months and you can embrace that, that's the right mindset. If your expectation is in the first 3 months, value stream management is going to improve our delivery by 40%, it's not. It's going to tell you how your business is working. And then a good value stream management solution will give you suggestions on how to go improve it.
Yeah, and Steve, I think you hit on something important there around the culture. The first 3 months, the weirdest thing I've seen with customers is everyone's just happier because you can finally talk about the things that have been, I think Stevie said earlier, everyone probably knows about these problems in their head, but senior executives may not, and they're the ones, kind of controlling things. So when you start talking about it, when it's kind of off everyone's chest and it's big and visible, the culture just instantly transforms, right? You start being one team, you start all aligning. So, that's really the 3-6 month, type of outcomes I see is people are having the right conversations. They are making the right action items in the plans because they now have this data to start driving these.
Yeah. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, we're coming up to getting close to the end of time. I just want to let our attendees know that if they're interested in taking a deeper dive into value stream and value stream management, in March, SD Times is going to again be producing its virtual VSM DevCon, which is a one-day training and learning all about value stream, and we encourage you to register for that. So as I said, we're coming up to time, but I want to give you a chance, both Steve and Brian, to kind of give people a summation or, one takeaway that's the most important thing that they should know. So why don't we start with you, Steve, and then we'll go to Brian.
Yeah, I would say anything, if you stuck with us this time and you thought the topic was interesting, reach out. I mean, at the end of the day, we just love to have a conversation. I'd love to hear about what you think your struggles are in your organization, where you think you want to improve at. As I mentioned earlier, we have a ton of great resources out on our website, hcltechsw.com. Data-driven DevOps, there's a whole ebook out there that will summarize a lot of the things we just talked about today. Getting started with value stream management is another great one. So take a look at those. They're free downloads. Encourage you to go look at them. And I just want to thank everybody for spending your time with us. And by all means, if you have questions, reach out to Dave, reach out to any of us. We'd love to answer them for you.
Yeah, I'll echo everything Steve said, but really what the takeaway should be is, go start your day. Do what you can, right? I think a lot of times everyone maybe feels like they can't change the bigger enterprise or we can't change how we work. But really, if you just kind of start sketching this out, or, I was actually with a customer, and as I was pitching them, he was sketching out their value stream on a notepad, right? Go do that, right? Just kind of see what it may look like or may feel like. And of course, contact us if you need help or read some of the ebooks or watch some of the webinars. But, really just go start today, start gathering this, kind of data, start looking at your teams, because that's going to prepare you for this next wave of value stream management and data-driven DevOps.
Mhm. Excellent. All right. Well, Steve Boone, Brian Shuck of HCL Software, thanks for being with us today and having this great discussion. Certainly like to thank HCL Software for sponsoring today's event. And of course, thanks all the attendees for hanging in with us today. We hope you got something out of it. And again, reach out to any of us if you want to hear more about the topic. So until next time, I'm Dave Rubenstein, Editor-in-Chief of SD Times. So long for now.
You guys, thanks, Dave.
Thanks, fellas.